It's time for our weekly Locked On 49ers off-season Q&A, little mailbag. We are going to get to your live chat questions on YouTube, your tweets, talk about free agency, NFL draft, the coaching search that is ongoing right now for the San Francisco 49ers for multiple positions. Are they retooling or are they running it back in 2025? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To Locked On 49ers, Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there, and welcome to the new listeners alike. Make sure helps us out tremendously. Hit that subscribe button. Do that right now for us, if you will. Hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And if you are joining us live on YouTube, hit us with some questions. What are your thoughts for the 2025 49ers offseason? I think this is going to be a weekly feature for the Niners. We don't have those pre-game, post-game lives to do anymore. I like going live with the listeners. So I think just open it up to the faithful, to the listeners, to the everydayers, to the crowd is a good way to go about sussing out some of the ideas and situations the 49ers find themselves in the 2025 offseason. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers, by the way, brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Croc, I'm going to ask you the first question, and different ideas of this question have been posed to me many times this offseason. I've pondered it myself. I think most 49ers fans are on one side. I want to hear what side you are on of this. Are the 49ers, or let me phrase it this way, not are they, should they be retooling in 2025? Or is this another run it back season for the San Francisco 49ers, who still have a wide open Super Bowl window with the current group of talent?
Wide open Super Bowl window. I wouldn't say it's wide open. That window is starting to kind of shrink a little bit, at least with the current cast that they have, the guys that they have to lean on to really boost them to becoming kind of like that Super Bowl winning team. You got Christian McCaffrey. He's a year older, and we know how that drop off for running backs, how it happens, and the injuries, they start piling up. Trent Williams, he's a little bit older. George Kittle, a little bit older. Deebo Samuel, playing a little bit older. Brandon Ayuk, coming off of an injury. So when you kind of look at it from that perspective, I don't know if they're ready to retool. I think they are a year away from that. Essentially, they're talking about rebuild. and that is almost what is about to happen because of these guys that you're counting on and what they're battling through. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way of me saying they are a year away from what you're alluding to.
And this is one of the arguments I've gotten into a lot recently. And a lot of what we talked about when we talk about the Brock Purdy contract and where he ranks. And some fans think, he's better than we say. Some fans think he's worse than we say. And which makes me believe that we kind of have it right, Croc, when we evaluate Brock Purdy and what we think he is, which is really good. But he doesn't belong in the elite tier. And you're probably, in my opinion, behind if you're paying him like, say, the Baltimore Ravens are paying Lamar Jackson. You're instantly behind the Baltimore
Josh
Ravens.
Allen, they just said something about him being like the first quarterback to make the All-Pro team with no other All-Pro players on his entire roster.
Right. And so that's kind of one of the arguments I've gotten into is when you start to look into the future, and maybe not as much in 2025, so maybe transitional year somewhat to the retooling era of the 49ers, but especially when you start looking at 2026, 2027, when a new Brock Purdy contract would start to hit its heights as far as annual cap hits go. Because they can, try to keep it down in the early part, and usually by year 2 or 3 of a 5-year contract, the numbers start going up and up as far as what a player actually gets paid every year in a long-term contract. Of course, they'll have void years and a lot to try to flatten out the curve as far as how much Brock Purdy is going to get paid every year, even if there is, $150 to $200 million of guarantees, not just the total contract, just the guarantees for Brock Purdy in a mega deal that could reach, $300 million over a 5-year contract. So the running it back idea for the 49ers means that they will slowly be worse every year. That's my take on it. If you keep running it back, well, Christian McCaffrey coming off of injuries, getting older, getting close to 30 years old, you probably won't ever see the 2023 Christian McCaffrey again. So you're running it back with Christian McCaffrey, yeah, and you hope he comes back from these injuries. Is he ever going to be that same player? I don't know. Trent Williams, will he retire? Will he be the same player? I would guess that he's not as good as he was in 2023 going forward. Deebo Samuel, and maybe all of those players I mentioned, George Kittle, hopefully he's around for a long time. He's still playing at a super high level. But you start looking ahead and you point to, okay, well, the 49ers were bad in 2024 because of all the injuries. Well, if you look at the 2026 roster and what it might be, it looks a heck of a lot like the injured 2024 roster for the San Francisco 49ers. So how are you getting better running it back? And there's a team right now, if I had to point to what it looks like to retool, it's a team that I thought 5 weeks into the season was going to be a fire sale and a complete rebuild and a reset button push. And I thought Matthew Stafford would be playing somewhere else. But the Los Angeles Rams kind of showed how if you have coach and quarterback right, you can retool, and you can retool relatively quickly. And they put resources into the defensive line, drafted and hit on a lot of guys. Hit on one of the rare first-round picks they've had in a while in Jared Verse, who's probably defensive rookie of the year in the NFL this year. Kobe Turner, a third rounder. Braden Fiske, a second rounder.
Braden Fiske, a guy who we were saying, don't see the first round hype, right? There were people talking about him being a first round guy. We were like, but he has, he played very well for the Rams this season.
You know where they got Verse and Fiske the most correct? And it's something we've talked about with the guys that the 49ers have also hit on, is those dudes are animals. They do not stop. Nonstop motor. So when all the amateur
did you see what the Rams posted on Twitter?
No.
It was like a picture from like SpongeBob. I don't want to butcher it. Hold on, I'll read it or maybe we could bring it up.
Okay. When you find that, I just want to say this because when it comes to pass rushers, and I think the 49ers are going to be looking at both ends and interior defensive tackles this offseason and in the draft and free agency. If you're scouting these guys, motor should maybe be the number one trait on your list that you're looking for with these pass rushers.
Yeah. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see the picture. And this is the Rams. They said nobody. Jared Verse and is Mr. Krabs jumping in the air.
Rope. Oh, dude, I love that.
Oh, yeah. I thought that was comedy.
No, that is cool.
If you guys didn't watch the game the other night, it was Jared Verse belly flopping on Sam Darnold. Literally just jumping 5 feet into the air and just landing on Sam Darnold with all his weight. And the Rams, I just thought it was funny that their social media team made a joke about it. But you talked about just the motor. That's an example of it, right? Like, this guy just doesn't stop.
Complete maniac. And it's funny because the scouting report had that stuff in there. It's like, man, really good bull rusher, but does he have the bend? And that's why he wasn't a top 10 pick. He was like wherever he ended up going, 17, 18 or something like that. The Rams pick 19. I can't remember where he was drafted. I think he was the second or third defensive player off the board in the draft. But the motor was there. And it's like, man, the bend doesn't matter. If from day one in the NFL, you're like the best bull rusher in the NFL, as Jared Verse has been. Like, dude's a maniac. And so it's fun watching him play. Braden Fiske, I still have some questions about him as a run defender, but for what he is, and he can still get after the quarterback and rush the passer, which is king in the NFL. So, really solid second round pick there. Kobe Turner's been a massive find for them in the third round. He's even better than Fiske is on the interior. They got Byron Young as well in the third round, a guy we were looking at when the Niners drafted Jair Brown last year. He was in that group of players we were looking at there. I think he went earlier in the third round, though. So, they did a really good job of really quickly retooling the defensive line. If you've got a bunch of animals on your defensive line and you can block for your quarterback up front and run the ball a little bit, and you've got a really good combination of coach and quarterback, maybe the best combination of coach and quarterback in the NFC, you're cooking. And if the 49ers have that, if Brock Purdy is that, and Kyle Shanahan is that, you can retool pretty quickly. I just worry about how old and slow some of the 49ers are currently. And I don't think the 49ers of 2026, if they just play it out and run it back continuously the next 2 off seasons, I don't think it's going to look any different than what the banged up, hurt, injured 2024 49ers were. And if you don't have a lot of money to spend because of how expensive your quarterback is and how expensive some of the guys who are still around are on your team, it's going to be hard to add a bunch of talent to the mix. And so you're just going to have to draft amazingly, essentially.
And that's where the 49ers are. Well, the good thing about if you want to find a silver lining with the season the 49ers just had, you got higher draft picks. And I know we always look at, they got pick 11 in the first round, but they're picking high in the second round as well. So you have an opportunity to gather a few guys that should be able to come in and kind of make immediate impacts, start right away if Kyle Shanahan wants to let it rip with some of his young guys. But that's an opportunity right there when you talk about retooling, especially while you're going through this transition of some of the older guys that eventually will get phased out in some way. I think this is a great opportunity this year when you have a down season like this. And you can attribute it to injuries and say, hey, all right, had some injuries, got some young players higher than we probably would have if we were healthy. Now we're able to retool on the move while some of these older guys, we start to phase them out just a little bit. And you mentioned one of the guys where he said, man, it might look like this in 2026, right? With that kind of cast. We talked about a lot of guys that may get worse. Some of these guys may get better. And you look at guys like Juwan Jennings. I feel like every time he plays in the game, he's getting better. So Ricky Pearsall, he will get better.
That's a big one.
You'll see a lot of that.
Like, is the Pearsall Ayuk connection, like, is that like daggers for defenses, right? With Brock Purdy slinging the rock. It might have to be, because I don't know if they're going to draft anybody that's going to be playing ahead of those guys when you start looking a couple years ahead. All right, next, we're going to get into the chat. Let us know what your questions are, your thoughts are on the 49ers 2025 offseason. This is your show. I already see a lot of really good ones, including talking about some specifics on in the NFL draft, what position the 49ers should be targeting here in the offseason in 2025. Next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose at FanDuel. And the FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Bet on all these playoff games in a million different ways. Tons of Super Bowl props, of course, at FanDuel. And my favorite way to bet on the NFL is NFL draft props, which are growing as well at FanDuel. NHL, NBA, every sport you can imagine, you can get in on that action at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I'm going to go to Rick in the chat. This says, if I can find it, he says, shouldn't we re-sign Ben Barch and have him and Burford Zakel fight it out for the left guard spot and not worry about drafting a guard, focus on tackle and center? I will start with that and say that, Rick, I'm not against the idea, just big picture idea of, okay, Kyle Shanahan likes to have a really smart veteran center. The center is the one that makes the calls. He doesn't put that on his quarterback, because his quarterback has long play calls and is trying to break down the defense pre-snap and making sure everyone's doing the right thing in motion. So all that is put on the center as far as making calls. And I don't think he wants a rookie center out there making those calls. And so, yeah, veteran center in Kyle Shanahan's offense, and you always want good bookend tackles. So to me, guard absolutely takes a back seat. And so I agree with that idea. And certainly I like what I saw from Ben Barch as someone who could be versatile at guard and center and give you some depth. There's been some talk that Ben Barch might retire as well, though. I'm not sure what's going on with that. I hope that's not the case, because he's a really nice depth piece for the 49ers. I haven't seen anything from Nick Zakel to think that he's I thought he shouldn't have made the roster, to be honest with you, most of the last couple of seasons. So we'll see there. Spencer Burford, I'm not sure where he's at, but maybe a role, especially if Jaylen Moore moves on, because he's a free agent. If maybe he's your swing tackle, gives you some opportunity to compete at guard. But I think if you're drafting an early offensive tackle, I think obviously you have a Hall of Famer as long as Trent Williams doesn't surprise everybody and retire this offseason, you got Trent Williams left tackle. So your left tackle of the future can just roll right into left guard as a rookie. So that would be my plan for left guard. Let the guys you mentioned be the depth, and let the guy that you draft in the first or second round not have to go out and be an offensive tackle day one, because that's a tough ask for rookies in the NFL. You have McKivitz, you have Trent Williams, you let him play left guard his first season, and then you move him out accordingly to either the left or the right side. That would probably be my plan there.
Yeah, and McKivitz is a guy who played well last season, and nobody was anticipating that. We thought he was going to be a big issue, but he stepped his game up. Maybe it was just a year of development, playing, true at the tackle position, but he did well enough to where if you draft a tackle or a guy that you want to be the long-term guy, you can play him at guard to start the season or start his career, at least for the season, until Trent Williams steps away, or maybe they don't bring back McKivitz next year.
There's a couple in the chat from LKV. I want to start with this one. He says, 49ers love versatility. Get a 6'5", 320-pound disruptor that can play 0 through 5 in any front. What do you think about that idea for the 49ers? And do you think they should move away from sort of upfield versatility in their defensive linemen and get more specialized, like the fastest guy on the outside and the biggest guy on the inside?
I've been hollering for just get the biggest guy. I want the guy that can only play 2 downs and then has to come out because he needs a rest, right? Because he's 350 pounds. I think it's the Florida Gators. And I don't know when that guy is coming out. I think he wears like number 21. But they have this huge dude on the line. He's got to be 400 pounds. I'm assuming he can't play more than 3 straight snaps. But, hey, I need you in here on these obvious rundowns. First down. A sneaky rundown is like second and long after an incomplete pass. They call that the get back on track down. So if you throw a first down that's incomplete, they like to come back with a run to try to get things moving a little bit.
Get third and
get
shorter.
Your big butt in there.
Yeah.
And
as long as he has enough athleticism to take up 2 blocks, give you a little push in the run game, in the pass game, if it is a pass play when he's in there in the field, and then athleticism to get off the field on third downs.
Yeah. And one guy I really liked was Dexter Lawrence. Now, I wasn't anticipating him being a top 20 pick. I thought he was going to be like early second round, and I wanted the 49ers to really get him. But, this that type of guy. Now, I think he's been like all pro. He's been pro. Like, he's been really good, exceeded any expectations that I had for what I thought in my head if the 49ers were to take him. But, get one of those guys, man, 6'4", 340, can't move. I thought Kinlaw could potentially be something like that. And I think his thing was he was just like more of a powerful pass rusher. And when he got to the NFL and wasn't a good pass rusher, it kind of went south a little bit for him as far as like what he was. I think then they tried to figure out like, okay, well, what is he? Okay, let's have him slim down to 290 pounds. And they're like, well, that didn't work,
Shout out to the little 559, Porterville, California. I see you out there. Last one here from LKV. He mentions the body type thing. Jared versus why you don't draft or why you shouldn't draft skinny edge rushers. What are your thoughts there? I do think that you can tend to overrate some speed rushers in college. And I think this goes for edge rushers. It goes for running backs. It goes for wide receivers. Because you can win real pretty in college, and then you get to the NFL and you're not running around guys anymore. You can be athletic, but these guys are freaks at offensive tackle in the NFL. You're not just going to run the arc and get sacks all the time in the NFL. You're not just going to run by guys all day with all kinds of space in your air raid offense as a wide receiver. You're not just going to get untouched and house call everything as a running back. You have to win dirty. You have to win through arm tackles. You have to win through contact as a wide receiver. You have to win with physicality in your routes. You have to block. So I don't care if you're skinny, as long as you have some physicality to your game. Can you convert speed to power a little bit? A guy like Brian Burns, I would love on the San Francisco 49ers. But if you're one-dimensional and you're just speed and you don't have any power to your game and you can't set the edge against the run, then I'm with you. Like, yeah, I'm all the way out on that. And I would much rather have a very one-dimensional, tight-hipped power edge guy in that case.
You mentioned Brian Burns. I mean, he was phenomenal with like just the pass rush repertoire that he displayed at Florida State. He did some freakish things too. You had quarterbacks trying to do read options, and he's like taking away the read and then tackling the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, he just did some things. He had a nasty spin move. So there wasn't just one way that he could win. So if you are going to be kind of a longer, kind of skinnier guy, have the versatility of Burns. Burns should have went higher than he did.
He should have. Yeah, he absolutely should have. And there's going to be guys that are that. In fact, the guy that I've kind of called and compared him to Burns, and I haven't done deep dives on the tape on a lot of these prospects yet, but James Pierce
out of Georgia.
You're talking about Jaylen Walker?
Walker?
Yeah, Jaylen Walker. He's a little smaller. I was talking about James Pierce from Tennessee, who's got more length. He's got that size, but plus he wore number 27, so it made him look like he was a wide receiver out there on the edge. He's got that same Brian Burns length and build, but he's really slim, almost looks like a basketball player out there. But Jaylen Walker's an interesting one too, because really twitched up as an athlete, but he might even be an off-ball linebacker. But remember, that's what we thought about in the 2021 draft. Everyone was evaluating Micah Parsons as a linebacker, as an off-ball linebacker. Yeah. And then he was such a good pass rusher in the NFL. They're like, well, never mind, dude, because this is way more valuable. Guess what? Gained 15 pounds. You are a defensive end now. And so is that in Jaylen Walker's future? And then again, if the 49ers end up with more of a 3-4 scheme, then potentially you could really utilize one of those types of guys. And I think it's somewhat easier to find. I mean, it's hard to find guys who are monsters against the run, super athletic, big, strong, and can bend. And like those guys don't grow on trees. So you kind of got to pick one or the other. And I think that's one of the genius parts of having that odd front is you can utilize the guys that are maybe a little bit lighter, but that are really good pass rushers still with a little bit of a multiple front and multiple looks, and utilize more players in that regard. The 3-4, by the way, can we run a campaign to get the name of the 3-4 defense changed to a 5-2?
That's essentially all it is. I mean, really, it's kind of a 4
on third down, which teams are in 70% of the time. You just have a 4-man front anyway, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't quite see just a traditional 3-4.
Right.
It's really 3. You got your 3 down lineman, then like a stand-up guy that's gonna rush.
Yeah, it's more about like the responsibilities. Do you have 4, like the wide 9 is you have 4 guys that aren't responsible for like 2 gapping like you would, where you would have a traditional nose tackle who takes on multiple blocks, and then you have a 5 technique, and then you've got the outside guys that are setting the edge. And but anyway, so yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about that next. What we want in the 49ers, I think we know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. Defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, and we'll get into more. Seeing a lot of good questions here in the chat about the 49ers 2025 offseason. Next. The final segment on today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Because that definitely happens. And I was blown away when I used Rocket Money of how many just total subscriptions I have. The other day, I was trying to buy some like multivitamins, and they were trying to sell me on a subscription. It's like, I got too many darn subscriptions, and that might be you. Rocket Money makes it easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. And that is rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Croc, what do you want in a defensive coordinator? Especially if it's not Robert Saleh, because Robert Saleh's got like every team interviewing him for head coach. I don't know if he's going to get one of those jobs, but Kyle Shanahan might sit there and be like, well, I can't wait for Robert Saleh to do all these interviews because I want to get my pick of the rest of the crop. And all of a sudden I wait, and then Dennis Allen gets snatched up, and Wink Martindale or whoever gets snatched up, and Deshae Townsend gets snatched up, and then Robert Saleh gets a head coach job, and then the 49ers are back where they were last year. And that was the big key that Kyle Shanahan talked about in his postseason press conference. He's like, he was basically said, paraphrasing, there's better candidates for us this offseason than there had been the past 2 off seasons.
I'm looking for someone that Kyle Shanahan trusts to do their own thing. Run the defense that you know. As you know, I've been learning a lot about offense, learning a lot about the air raid. I'm getting ready to call plays, and I have someone who's essentially kind of an offensive consultant, was a quarterback at University of Washington, and he's kind of helping me with certain things. Well, when we're describing things and I'm talking about what I've learned in the air raid offense and how, like, okay, this is my philosophy, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm trying to do it, and just listening to him tell me about some of the things that he did and how he did it, it's almost like speaking another language. Like, it's kind of hard to just, if you're not just sitting around this person and like adopting it over time, it could be a little challenging to grasp something, to grasp something and like make it, like teach it and make it something to where you're speaking the same language as this person, or that your mind works in that same way, because we all see things different. So if I'm Kyle and I want to hire a defensive coordinator, you have to hire a guy to call this defense and do the things that he wants, because he knows the adjustments to that. He knows how, okay, if they do this, I'm going to do this. And it's almost like second nature. When something bad happens, he knows exactly how to fix it, as opposed to trying to adopt something from someone else and then have all the answers as you would if it was something you grew up doing. So find a coordinator that, hey man, do your thing. Like, who is that person for Kyle? And maybe it's Robert Saleh. And maybe it's Saleh because Saleh came up, for years with, making adjustments and doing those things through Kyle. So Kyle just trusts him to do his own thing. I think if you do it that way, you'll get the best version of the coach.
Yeah, the trust is there. And if you're going to hire someone who's established in the NFL as a longtime coordinator, you're going to be cool with their scheme they're bringing in before you hire him. Someone like Dennis Allen, that guy's going to have some autonomy to run his defense the way he wants to. A lot of people like the idea of Dennis Allen. And I've said before that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan need their version of Steve Spagnuolo, someone who's not going to get a whole bunch of head coach interviews and leave in a year, but is a really good coordinator and could stick around for a long time. And so I wouldn't be against someone like Dennis Allen, if that's the case. But you gotta find a guy and pick it. Like, if whoever it is, you got to get it right. If whoever it is, it doesn't hit this year, Kyle Shanahan might be out of a job. He's got to pick the right guy this year. And I think the trust factor is why he probably wants Robert Saleh. One thing I do like about Robert Saleh too is the energy he brings. Like, the 49ers just lacked that energy on the sideline post Saleh, post DeMeco Ryans. Like, they need someone who's going to flex and get people fired up. And even if it's not the defensive coordinator, that guy needs to hire somebody who is flexing on dudes and getting them fired up. Just really flat, it felt like, coming from the sideline on the 49ers defense the last 2 years.
Yeah, but I feel like as a player, if I need my coach to fire me up, I don't know, I'm doing something wrong a little bit. Like, your coach should not be the one to have to fire you up to get you going to play good football. Like, my coach is there, and obviously you want a guy who's a motivator and he's fired, like all that, like, cool. But really, you just need someone that's going to call plays to put you in position to make plays. And it's on you to make those plays.
You ever go to the club, Croc?
It's been a while.
The DJ like puts on a song and he's giving it one of these. He doesn't have to do that, but for some reason, it's just a little extra. And it gets the crowd moving a little bit more. So I want a little bit of that from my defense coordinator. You should be able to dance on your own and feel the music, and that should be enough. But if the DJ can add a little extra, then I think that can help. But to be honest with you, I don't go to a lot of clubs, and so
I would love to see Brian Peacock in the club.
I go to clubs, but they're very different clubs. They're like punk rock clubs, and there's just like 100 people standing with their hands in their pockets watching the bands. That's my speed as far as clubs go. Lee asks, is Ulbrich dropped off the radar? Is he fired yet? I'm pretty sure he's out of a job, but has interviewed for his old job as interim head coach, as head coach with the New York Jets. And I think that's the only job so maybe he's not let out of his contract quite yet. Kind of a tough situation for the interim coach, because you can't go and interview for other jobs, but you have to interview for the job you're going to get fired from, because the whole staff already got fired. So Ulbrich's another name is interesting because Kyle Shanahan already asked to interview him last offseason and wasn't allowed to by Robert Saleh, and they both got axed.
Do the Jets know who they want as head coach? Because I don't know how you fire a coach months ago and you haven't named someone head coach. Like, so is that telling us like, oh, it's Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, who is a former New York Jet?
Aaron Glenn's on the list. Aaron Glenn has interviewed with every team. Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn interviewed with every single opening, I think. Except for one, Aaron Glenn declined the interview with the Patriots. Because the Patriots did the opposite. They fired their guy the day after the season and already had Vrabel signed hired the next day. They didn't want anybody else. That was their plan, right? And for the Jets, you feel like they're kind of rudderless over there. But I know your guy, Rex Ryan, is campaigning for the job, and he has interviewed for the job, by the way. Rex Ryan has. And if you want to hear all the names that are associated with all the teams, me and my guy Matt Williamson on today's Peacock and Williamson NFL show went through every single head coach and GM opening and talked about every single person that has been interviewed or requested to interview so far this offseason.
Rex Ryan.
Rex Ryan for the 49ers defensive coordinator job.
Yeah. Rex Ryan, you talk about fiery motivator. And obviously he's not going to be, he might not be in shape to run stairs and look like Robert Saleh on the sideline. But I've talked about him. I remember when we reported to training camp, he gave the speech of a lifetime. I was ready to start crying and running through a wall for him. Oh man, Rex Ryan. It's very rare that you find coaches like Rex Ryan who have everything, right? A lot of times you'll see a coach who maybe he's a great motivator, not the most amazing X's and O's guy, maybe not the greatest teacher. You find somebody who's a great teacher, not the best motivator, right? But Rex was everything all in one. He was an amazing motivator. He was a terrific player coach. He was super smart and an amazing teacher in the way that he taught. And I think that's an overlooked aspect of coaching. The way he taught, I still remember things to this day because of how he worded it and how so I could rattle off some of the plays that we were running because of that, because of the way that he taught. So that is someone, and I get how he comes off to the media, but he does that a lot. And we're talking about in his press conference and stuff, because it kind of instills a certain level of confidence in his players. It's like when you hear your coach saying these things, it's like, man, he's got our back. He believes in us. That's Rex. I think Rex would be really cool for the 49ers. He's a cool cat. He's a cool cat.
I don't know if a coordinator job would be enough to get him out of the cushy TV gig, though. I think he wants that head coach money.
Yeah.
Specifically with the Jets. I like that he's campaigning for it. You don't hear that a lot, though. Like he's like, I would give everything to this job. So I do like hearing that. Why not Jim Schwartz? Farrell says in the chat, Jim Schwartz is currently employed is why. He's still a defensive coordinator. And I think if you asked to interview him, it would be the same as what happened last year with Ulbrich, and they would say no. So unless Jim Schwartz gets fired, he's not available. You know what needs to happen for the 49ers is Steve Spagnuolo, defensive coordinator for the Chiefs, who has interviewed, I think, with 2 or 3 teams for their head coach jobs. He needs to get that stinking head coach job because he's one of the secret, like everyone talks about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Steve Spagnuolo, I think, is the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. Like they got it going on over there in Kansas City for a reason. If he gets a head coach job, not only is he no longer the defensive coordinator of the Chiefs, that when he gets fired in 2 years, then the Niners can hire him to be their defensive coordinator.
That's what Kyle does, right? Oh, man, It was challenging going up against that defense. Let me go get the guy that got me some problems, which is a great idea.
When is the mock draft? I don't know. We're probably going to have some mock drafts coming up real soon. Right, Croc? Are you are you working on a mock draft right now behind the scenes, Croc?
I got to start diving into some of these players a little bit.
We got to have a pretty solid at least top 10 of the NFL draft. Niners are picking at 11. You know they're not drafting one of the quarterbacks, right? So I think we should probably be able to come up with a top 10 real soon and then start to work from there and move things around with what we think the 49ers, because picking at 11, that pick's going to come up quick on draft day. It's going to be a lot of fun. Some really good questions. Apologies to the ones we didn't get to. Keep them coming. Let us know in the YouTube comments or on Twitter, and we will continue to hit your questions and cover the San Francisco 49ers as they go through this pivotal offseason in 2025. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to this podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.